When you think of road legal race car, you think of things like the 911 GT3, or the original M3, or the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, something like that. But there is another element, one that's not really talked about as much as you would think, because people don't think of it as a road legal racing vehicle. But one company pioneered taking a trophy truck and bringing that DNA to the road to its fullest extent. I'm talking about, of course, Ford with the Raptor.
Absolutely not.
The Ford F-Series has been in non-stop production since 1948, but it wasn't until the 9th generation in 1992 that a performance version was launched. The Lightning had bucket seats, lowered suspension, and a 240 horsepower 5.8-liter V8. And the handling was fine-tuned by Jackie Stewart. By 2004, it had a 5.4-liter V8 with an Eaton supercharger, making 380 horsepower and 450 torque. It was a respectable performance vehicle. But SRT at Dodge threw the Viper V10 into the Ram 1500, and it was a whole 0.3 of a second faster than the SVT to 60. They tried to make a new sports truck concept, but it was deemed too cumbersome to be practical for production, effectively saying that Dodge won. They had the undisputed king of sport trucks. So instead of competing with them, SVT just ignored them completely and decided against ramming a pickup truck into a track shoe. They would decide to slip it into a hiking boot. So in 2008, SVT unveiled a hardcore, off-road racing version of the F-150 called the Raptor. The F-150 has the coolest names ever, Lightning and then Raptor. Awesome. But they weren't just going to launch this into the public and see what happens. No. Instead, they took it racing, the Raptor R, to the most grueling endurance event in the Western Hemisphere, the Baja 1000. Now, by 2008, Ford had already won the event 12 times, the likes of the Bronco and the Ranger. And the nearly stock Raptor came in third. It was almost road legal. And in 2008, it finished on the podium. That's not bad. But more importantly than the finishing position, it gathered them data. And they used that information and incorporated it into the road version launched the next year in 2009. So it had 12-inch Fox racing shocks. The body was given 8 inches of fender flares to fit massive 35-inch off-road tires, and it got a 6.2-liter, naturally aspirated V8, making 415 horsepower and 445 foot-pounds of torque. It could do 0 to 60 in 7.1 seconds in a 6,000-pound truck, which is already pretty impressive, if not a little bit slow by the comparisons of sports cars and whatnot, but for a truck it's very impressive. But more to the point, it can do that 0 to 60 time anywhere, on any terrain. It's the closest thing to a trophy truck ever seen on America's highways. And it was only $42,000, which is significantly cheaper than a trophy truck. I mean, it even comes with the cool trophy truck style decals on the back that look like mud things, mud sprays. Yeah, Raptor's awesome. The first generation especially is one of my favorite trucks ever made. But we wouldn't get a second-gen Raptor until the release of the 13th generation F-150. But that was a whole new platform, which meant Ford Performance had to completely redesign the Raptor. Now that didn't mean we didn't actually have a Raptor in production between 2014 and 2017, but when it did come back, it had a 3.5-liter twin-turbocharged EcoBoost V6, making 450 horsepower and 510 foot-pounds of torque. It's basically a detuned Ford GT engine, the same one that won Le Mans in 2016. It also had the first 10-speed gearbox in a consumer vehicle, which is kind of interesting. But that's all technical stuff. It was still the dune-destroying icon that it always was. And to prove its lack of cylinders didn't matter, Ford took a near completely road-legal Raptor to the Baja 1000 once again. But this one was even more simplified. As in, the only modifications were some racing spec shocks, a roll cage, a fuel cell, and a fire extinguisher. And you know what? It finished the 855-mile, 36-hour endurance blast in 35 hours, 59 minutes, and 8 seconds. Yep, they weren't cutting it close at all, completing the event in the deadline by just 52 seconds, securing third in class. And that meant, like the first gen, the 2017 Raptor got even bigger 14-inch shocks, even bigger 37-inch off-road tires, and a brand new terrain management system. And thanks to its aluminum construction, it lost 500 pounds, making it even faster. It had more power, a lot more torque, 500 pounds off the curb weight, and it was even more capable off-road. It's a masterpiece, honestly. Now here's where things get interesting. We're technically in the third generation right now, but it's essentially the same vehicle. It's got some more low-down torque and a better interior, but otherwise it's still the great vehicle. And side note, it's a V6, and everybody was upset that they were losing the V8 because of the noise. But honestly, I've heard people say this, and I completely agree with them. It sounds like a GTR, because it's a V6 twin-turbo, and the exhaust is fantastic. So I'm glad they didn't change that in the third gen. But for those of you who are missing that V8 sonnet, well, you can get the Raptor R, eventually. 90% chance it's actually called the Raptor R, which will be really confusing because the racing version was called the R. I hope they don't call it that, although there is a high likelihood that they will. They haven't announced all of the details yet, so this is what we're speculating based on existing evidence. Almost certainly, it will also have the 5.2-liter V8 from the Shelby GT500. And will it have the full 760 horsepower? I would imagine so, since the Ram T-Rex has 702 horsepower, and Ford cannot let that go unanswered. We don't know much about the Raptor R, except that we should be seeing it soon and it will not be cheap. But in the meantime, you can get your crazy Raptor fix with modification shops. Albeit a lot more expensive, because for just $125,000, you can have yourself a Shelby Raptor with carbon fiber, a massive light bar, even higher suspension, 510 horsepower, and over 600 torque. But anything Shelby can do, Hennessy will do it bigger. The Velociraptor 600 boosts power by 150 horsepower and can do the quarter mile in 12.9 seconds, which is insane, but not nearly as insane as the vehicle I was actually referring to, the Velociraptor 600 6x6. Because what's crazier than a 600 horsepower off-road racing truck? A six-wheeled 600 horsepower off-road racing truck. Sure, it's $350,000, but you do get a lot of truck, literally, for your cash. Now, all of this was happening in the US only, and European off-road enthusiasts were looking over the pond with envy, wanting their own Raptors. And they got it in 2018 in the form of the Ranger Raptor. Just like how the Ranger is the baby F-150, the Ranger Raptor is the baby Raptor. It still got the fancy terrain management system and Fox suspension, but the engine wasn't quite as fancy. It's a 2-liter, 4-cylinder diesel, making 370 torque and 210 horsepower in a big pickup truck. Yeah, it's not fast. Basically, it's great at barreling through any terrain at high speed. It just takes a really long time to get up to that high speed, but it'll get there eventually. And it also wasn't sold in the US for fear of cannibalizing the F-150 Raptor sales, but luckily they learned their lessons in 2023 with the Ranger Raptor not just coming to America, but getting a new engine, a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 making 300 horsepower and 360 torque. That is what I like. I already like the Raptor F-150, but I do think it's a little big. The Ranger Raptor is a bit smaller, and I actually think, depending on how it performs, I'll like it better than the F-150 Raptor, which is saying something because I do quite like the F-150 Raptor. But if the Ranger's lighter, it could be better, because lighter vehicles are always better. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We got another year to wait, unfortunately. Now, I know what you're saying, but what if you don't like pickup trucks? I mean, so far, the Ranger and the F-150 are Raptors, but I don't want a pickup truck, because I don't want to tailgate somebody on the highway going 80 miles an hour. Well, I have good news. The Bronco is getting the Raptor treatment. They're taking the already incredibly capable Bronco Wildtrak and widening it even more, and then fitting a 400 horsepower 3-liter V6 in it. Frankly, I just hope the F-150 Raptor R is a success, so that we have a chance of getting a proper V8 Bronco once again. That is beyond the realm of speculation into conspiracy theories and hopes, which is a dangerous thing to do in the automotive speculative market, but, a person can hope for a cool V8 powered SUV designed to go Baja racing. Please, Ford. We don't really have that much information about the Raptor, Bronco Raptor, I want to call it. It's been only announced recently as the time of filming this, so we'll get more information on the way, just like the Raptor R. But in the meantime, what we do have with the Ranger Raptor and the F-150 Raptor are two fantastic off-road vehicles, some better than others, but think about it, until the T-Rex came along, the F-150 Raptor invented that market. Yeah, I know there was the Ram Runner, or whatever it was called, in 2013, but that was a crazy kit that they somehow managed to produce limited quantities of. I love it, but the F-150 Raptor made it accessible and comfortable because it has a good interior, unlike the Ram from 2013. Now that Ram is caught up, we got a bit of a horsepower war going on, which, again, I think is nothing more than a gimmick because you're not going to use 800 horsepower in your road truck off-road because then you'll just die. So I would actually take the normal Raptor over the upcoming Raptor R, most likely. That hasn't been announced yet in terms of the actually in the flesh. But right now, that's where I'm sticking my guns at. But maybe with the noise,